This is me. Basically, a Game of Thrones style shot, except my teeth are brushed and no one here is about to betray me, I think. I don't even really know where to start. This is basically an Instagram local restaurant review voiceover, but instead of food, it's guitars, and a mild amount of existential dread. You walk in and immediately forget everything you've ever known how to play on a guitar. It's like your motor skills evaporate. I was super stoked to catch up with some excellent buds in person. I saw Ben Cote absolutely rip it at Hogstrom, where he was somehow scheduled to play like 20 shows in 3 days. A very cool long-standing brand with excellent builds and a killer roster of artists. I figured I'd find Johnny Beane somewhere near his cousin, Steve Rosen, who was featuring his first-hand account book about his time with Eddie Van Halen. That checked out immediately. Great to see you, pal. I only caught my 80s collab partner, ColeRocksIt, as I was basically crawling out the door, because I thought it was a good idea to hit around 40 booths in a single day. I watched Jim Gaustad play through Mahaffay's absurdly good-sounding 45-watt Plexi hot rod style amp, paired with a vintage Charvel that originally belonged to the head honcho Tris Mahaffay back in the 80s. The amp sounded insanely thick, dynamic, and splatty, almost like it was permanently attached to a Variac starving the tubes. These guys were incredibly generous and let me play through the rig several times. I also geeked out hard over Shabat Guitars. Their super strats are basically art. The relicing is so good, it looks effortless, which I'm told is the hardest kind. I noodled around with one of their pink cheetah models through a Soldano, and it absolutely ripped. They also handed me a baritone that was basically a wolf in sheep's clothing. It was mean. This was also when two terrifyingly talented players launched into a Berklee College of Music level funk blues jam and then looked over at me to play something. I had no idea what I was doing. I smiled through the pain. Somehow, I ended up in the Peavey room and got a full tour of a bunch of new and re-released gear. I played their Poplar Burl HP2 through a compact 6505 head and a handful of pedals acting as preamps. The vintage pedal absolutely stood out to me and sounded like I came across a true vintage preamp. I also heard some truly hilarious perfectionist Van Halen stories from the days when Ed was working with them, which alone was worth the price of admission. I then ran into John at Sully Guitars and immediately went down a rabbit hole. I mentioned that one of his builds looked inspired by Robbin Crosby's Jackson Explorers, and that opened the floodgates. He shared stories about being pals with Robbin, hanging out back in the day, and then segued into how he later built a guitar for Nicky Six, with a subtle, agreed-upon nod to King. I'd felt like a kid in a candy shop. I was actually able to try it, the Raven, their Explorer-style model, and it was unreal. Impeccable craftsmanship, and with a finish that shifts color depending on the light. At one point, after I finally felt warmed up at a booth, 19-year-old Gavin Stone jumped in right after me, wearing a cool hat, and immediately made me want to throw all my guitars out the window. He made me feel like I was 12 years old again. I then turned left and proceeded to watch 12-year-old Aanika pie melt my face off. Welcome to NAMM. One of the coolest surprises was catching up with Brant at Mite, a vintage brand that's making a serious comeback. You might know them as the company that supplied Ed's Bumblebee guitar with its famous bridge pickup. Their whole thing now is reclaiming discontinued and special run parts and hardware from various brands, then working with other companies and independent artists to give that stuff new life. It's very Frankie build energy. You can find incredibly relic'd necks, that Van Halen Motherbucker pickup based on Ed's, and other bodies that were designed based solely on a couple foggy images back from the 80s. Vega Trem is another name that's been climbing fast, and you really don't get it until you try one. Soren Anderson demoed it for me personally, and after picking my jaw up off the floor, I got to play one myself. It lived up to the hype. Just a genuinely wholesome brand that values good people as much as good gear. I already know one of these is ending up on a future build. Another big standout was the booth from RIP Guitars and This Heavy Earth Amps and Effects. Rob and his wife, Elise, at RIP had some absolutely killer custom builds. Neck-through Explorers, star-shaped guitars, with my favorite reverse banana-style headstock. I tried the Pop-Tart finish guitar, and man, it felt incredible. That feeling got even better once it was running through one of Shay's This Heavy Earth heads. I'm still baffled he managed to fit a 200-watt head into something you could basically carry in a backpack. Super hot rod tones, and not just for metal. I was ripping through all the cheesiest 80s licks without even thinking about it. I did try to get into the Kramer corner of the Gibson room. Turns out it was only dealers and appointments only, which is fair. I totally get it.
Let me in.
So yeah, first NAMM, equal parts inspiration, humiliation, and motivation. I'll take that trade every time.